warm-ups. Am I right?
Right hands.
Triple it.
You can't swing a cat these days without hitting hours of warm-up footage on YouTube or Instagram. But what if they weren't benefiting us as much as we thought? In this video, I'm going to explore some reasons, some of them drum-related, others psychological, why warm-ups might not be doing what we think they're doing, and tell you what you might do instead. But I'll also come clean about what I'm doing at the beginning of every practice session, and you can decide whether that makes me a huge hypocrite or not. Stay tuned. Warm-up 1, singles drill. Here's a warm-up I actually do these days, usually on every other day. It starts with groups of 5 in each hand. Goes on to groups of 6. Then groups of 7. I do this all on the snare drum, and I listen for evenness. I also try to keep both sticks in the center. If you can see from the overhead, there's a milk jug lid sized hole worn in the center of my drum. And that's why longtime fans will recognize Nate's actual snare drum, not the crap he borrowed one, so you can stop giving me. Next, I'll alternate singles in one hand with single strokes with both hands together, like this. Later in this lesson, what I'm doing for doubles, paradiddles, around the kit, and my right foot. The fact that I'm actively brainstorming warm-ups hopefully inoculates me against the accusation that I'm somehow holier than thou, or saying I'm better than the audience, because I'm thinking about the efficiency of warm-ups. Whatever the issues, I'm doing this stuff too. Now, let's talk about one of the issues. It's time for Stay With Me Bros segment 1. I promise I'll come to the point. But why not take the ride and see how I tie this back together with drums? I mean, where do you need to be in the next 15 minutes, right? Okay, story. You know the homeopathy aisle in Whole Foods, where tons of homeopathic remedies are marketed along, say, vitamin D? I'll let you Google the efficacy of homeopathy. I'm not going to directly express an opinion, except for this one. It works. Here's my bet. If you have a cold and you take homeopathic arnica, you will probably feel better. That means it's doing something for you, right? Well, consider this. In a study conducted in 2002, researchers found patients who received knee surgery reported feeling much better just a few weeks after the surgery. Not surprising, right? Well, here's the thing. Another group in the same study received no knee surgery. They just went to the operating room, got anesthesia, and had an incision, which the doctors then closed with no other interventions. And the group who received the real surgery reported no better outcomes than those who received the sham surgery. To quote the abstract, at no point did either of the intervention groups report less pain or better function than the placebo group. Placebo group. This was a placebo-controlled trial. And people receiving the placebo, the fake knee surgery, reported just as good results. So what's going on here? Warm-up 2, doubles drill. I started noticing that my doubles and ghost strokes were inconsistent, especially at low volumes. So I decided to dust off a warm-up I've been using since high school and give it a new coat of paint. This is the same principle as the 5, 6, and 7 note groups we started with. There's a classic warm-up that switches between singles, doubles, and paradiddles, but it's in 4 and it doesn't incorporate the feet. I decided to take this principle and incorporate it into what I was already doing. And the goal here is to make these as even as possible and have the doubles exactly the same volume as the singles. Next, we'll talk about starting to move it around the kit a little. The placebo effect. It means taking a sugar pill will often make us feel better. There's some debate as to why. Some scientists speculate that the body gets a signal you're taking efforts to recover, so it starts allocating resources to healing itself. And here's the crux. Because the placebo effect exists, you can't test drugs against no drugs to see if they're effective. Homeopathic arnica would likely be not taking homeopathic arnica most of the time if we did studies that way, which is debatable when you're charging $4.99 a bottle. But what about an expensive prescription drug that costs billions of dollars to develop, has potentially dangerous side effects, and costs your insurer $299 a bottle? Everybody from the FDA down to your insurance company really wants to know you're getting something from this expensive new wonder drug that's earning the pharma company even more billions, that you couldn't just get from a sugar pill or homeopathic arnica. Hence, placebo control. You give one group the new drug and another group an identical pill with none of the active ingredients. You don't tell the patients or even the researchers who's receiving which. The measured effect your new drug has is hence the difference between the effect it has on the drug group and that it has on the placebo group. Stay with me. Time for warm-up number 3, taking singles around the kit. Next, I'll play the singles drill across the drums, either like this, or like this if I want to save time. Again, I'm trying to make sure everything is even and the same volume, both on a single drum and drum to drum. Also, I'm trying to play in the center of the drum. So we know placebo is not a direct chemical effect a drug has on your body over and above the psychological effect. But the other side to this is, those psychological effects are real. Placebos work. And they can be great for purely psychological realms. Think pre-shot routines for golfers, who often work with coaches to come up with a pre-shot choreography that's the same every time they address the ball. Or F1 drivers. Here's Daniel Ricciardo doing a pre-race routine with his coach just before a race. Here's Michael Phelps doing his pre-race routine you probably grew to know and love if you watched any Olympics. And remember our knee surgeries. The placebo effect appears to be so potent, it can in some cases even cause improvements in physical systems, like our knee surgery recipients. So what's doing the heavy lifting in those knee surgeries? There's some evidence that it's cultural signals. In our culture, the white lab coats and the surgical theater, both the physical space and the ritual, are cultural signals that we're about to get effective treatment. And the 2002 knee study indicated those signals were all that was necessary to get the patient's knees to start feeling better and performing better. And that the actual mechanics of the real surgery didn't add any additional benefit. So we can take those signals and rituals and use them to our advantage. Tiger's pre-shot routine is sending a signal to his brain, as is Ricciardo's pre-race routine, as is Phelps's pre-race routine. These symbolic routines help athletes get in the zone by sending a symbolic decoy signal to the brain. It's a talisman, like Dumbo's feather, but it's a useful one because their performance actually improves as a result of it. Now it's time for warm-up 4, playing across the drums. Just like the single drum exercises, we start with the singles, then move around the drums. Here's what the 5-note pattern looks like. Now here's what the 6-note version looks like. Finally, here's the 7-note version. I do these slow to fast to slow, and I don't hesitate to move from 5 to 6 to 7 and back again. When I finally get back to improvising, everything's smoother. Or is it? But what about the times when placebos, rituals, or talismans can lead us astray? When I was younger, I used to have a pre-rehearsal routine. I'd felt super comfortable after one particular practice routine and spent years trying to duplicate that feeling before every rehearsal. What that meant was, before every rehearsal, I'd have some little warm-ups I'd do just to get the juices going. Over time, it grew more and more elaborate. Eventually, there was a whole 25-minute routine that if I didn't do it before a rehearsal, that rehearsal just wouldn't feel right. One thing this pandemic, which if you're watching this in the future, this was filmed during the COVID epidemic, is teaching us is how to sanitize or wash our hands every time we come into contact with the outside world.
And wash the backs of both hands and in between your fingers.
When I leave the house, once I touch a public doorknob, I have to sanitize before I touch anything in or on my car. Once I leave the grocery store or the practice studio, I have to sanitize again before I touch even the door handle. If I walk out of the apartment to go to the storage space, which is downstairs, and touch the elevator buttons, and then forget and touch my doorknob with that same hand, I now have to wipe that doorknob down with Lysol. But imagine you had to do this whole elaborate ritual not during an epidemic, but during regular life. Take it too far and there's a word for it. Obsessive compulsive disorder.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's a maladaptive ritual because it's something we do to make ourselves feel better, but it's causing negative consequences in our life. Examples of maladaptive rituals are everywhere. Two of the most famous are eating disorders and cutting. When your ritual, placebo, or talisman starts to impose a heavy cost on your life, it's probably time to consider weaning yourself. Warm-up 5, right foot. This is one of my favorites, and it comes from something I've seen Tony Williams and Vinny do. Back in college, I decided I wanted to be able to do singles between either hand and my right foot. We used the same 5, 6, and 7 note groups as the basis. Then we had the right foot in between. Etc. Finally, we take it across the drums. So we've got a taxonomy here. Placebo versus non-placebo, and an adaptive placebo versus maladaptive placebo. In which category do we slot drum warm-ups? One reason to rest easy is that adaptive learning thing. We learn skills by many repetitions in a high feedback environment. If you keep shooting arrows at a bullseye, even without coaching, you're likely to get closer to the target over time. Your brain will correlate the minute physical adjustments with the results, and you'll improve automatically. And insofar as they're doing that for us, real warm-ups probably do help us more than a magic warm-up dance. It was purely ritual but didn't train any actual skill. But there's probably a diminishing returns effect too. And warm-ups start to become maladaptive when they cut into time we could spend more productively working on other things. When I used to practice the same long warm-up routine before every practice session, every day for 2 years, two things happened. First, my sensitivity to it decreased. Like not being able to see the bullseye anymore, but just going through the motions shooting the arrows. I got so used to playing the warm-ups, I wasn't detecting all the subtle improvements I could be making anymore. So at that point, it was mostly placebo. Something that improved my playing only insofar as it gave me a psychological salve, like Dumbo's feather, or Tiger Woods' pre-shot routine. And it was high cost too because I wasn't working on other things I could have been working on. Last year, I released a course designed to help drummers practice more productively, and did a couple months worth of surveys and research before releasing it. I looked at the responses of thousands of drummers from my audience, and one of the most common complaints about their practice is they didn't feel it was benefiting their real-world playing. Well, what do you have to do to benefit your real-world playing? You have to derive goals from real-life problems you're having, then program your practice around it, then see if your playing is improving in real life. When I asked, guess what these drummers are doing in the shed instead? The same warm-ups they'd been doing for years. So by all means learn warm-ups. Take mine. Steal Annika's. Take Drumio's. But just be mindful of when they stop being an exercise and start being a placebo or ritual. Then watch out for when they start becoming a maladaptive ritual. So guys, if you've been watching the channel for a hot minute and you feel like you're ready to go a little bit deeper, I recommend that you subscribe to my mailing list. And for doing that, I'm going to give you 3 videos that don't appear on my YouTube channel, which are a little more structured, a little bit more value-packed in terms of the exercises, and which I assert will improve your playing more in the next 3 weeks than it's improved in the last 6 months. But You may also want the transcription of the warm-up exercises in this lesson, so I'm going to let you kill 2 birds with a single click. Click the singular link below this, and on the next page, you'll be able to choose whether you just want to download the transcription, no mailing list sub at all, or go ahead and get the transcription with a sub to my mailing list, get those 3 free videos, and also get on the waitlist to hear when I open my premium courses. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy this. See you again next week for another lesson of the week. Is that distracting with that thing behind me? Okay, but it's a shittier shot. My head is like almost out of the frame. Whatever though, do this for you guys. Do you appreciate it? No. And also get on the wait list when I orpin. Dudes, it's been real dumb.